just, you want to just like wait for a few more people till we actually start, or do you want to start doing it?
No, I was thinking that we should probably wait until like 9 to get going.
Yeah, okay.
And then we can do introductions and I'll remind people about
All right.
emails.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. Hi, everyone. We are just going to wait another minute or so in case anybody else is going to hop on. Just a reminder before we get started, if any of you are in a room viewing this training together, for attendance purposes, please send me an email with everybody's name and email so that I can send you your certificates, because what it looks like on my side is just the person who logged in. I've also enabled everybody's mics and cameras, so you can hop on if you have questions while we're going through things. And I think that's all you need to know from me.
Okay.
Well, there's an echo from somebody.
Yeah, if you're making noise, I have the power to mute you, so I might do that if I notice that there are echoes or just like noises coming from people. You can always unmute yourself if you need to. Seems like folks are still trickling in a little bit.
Is she talking right now?
Jack, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to mute you. You're the one that's echoing. Since it's 9:03, I think we are good to get started. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Eli Pellegrino. I'm an environmental analyst with the Subsurface Wastewater Unit. I process some of the permits, and I also do communications and other things for the unit. And also presenting is Brent Lawson, the state site evaluator and the state plumbing inspector, and he will be starting us off with the presentation.
Glad everybody could make it that's on here. We appreciate it. And I think I sent out an email, I think it was last week, that this is probably the last one that we're going to be doing this year. Maybe we'll be doing one in the fall, but we're going to try to, but we're already this year, we are very busy, and there's a lot of variances coming in, and it's going to be a real busy year. I know we say that every year, but I think this is going to be really, really busy. So again, as we're going through this, if you have anything a question or anything, please, hop on the chat thing and let us know. We'll try to keep notice of that, as well as when we're doing the slide presentation, but sometimes that's hard to do. So if you don't get answered, right away, just, go ahead and ask again. That's fine. And then we'll get started with the thing. So again, this is a subsurface wastewater disposal training. It's roughly going to be about from 9 to 12. There is also Eli is going to be doing forms. I'm going to go over all the new forms, and what I'll be doing is basically basic installation, first inspection, second inspection, tanks, D-boxes, stuff like that. So we're going to try next year, hopefully, to do something with like pre-treatment. We're going to try to get together, the major players and all the pre-treatment stuff, and maybe even Elgins and end drains and stuff like that, and see if they can do like a little half-hour presentation online so we can get everything together. And I think that'll be helpful as well, because it's hard to keep on doing basic installation and inspections when there's nothing new that pops up. But this time, that's going to be included in the 2023 rule changes. So that'll be a part of the inspections and installations as well on this slide. So I guess we'll get going. I guess we already went over what we'll be covering. Basically, that's what it is. There's going to be some malfunctions in here, why they malfunction, and issues like that. So before we even get started, we have basically, the plumbing inspector has to be notified at least 24 hours in advance. A lot of times the plumbing inspector will act before then if they have time. There is no limit to how long a plumbing inspector can get to the site. And this is because of all the LUPC territories. So a lot of times the plumbing inspector that is in charge of those territories, they don't live like right next door. So it takes a while to get up there. And I think that a lot of times plumbing inspectors and the contractors that work in the area, they know this. So hopefully they notify the plumbing inspector well in advance when they're ready to, when they think they're going to be ready to do it. So that really hasn't been an issue. Only a couple times when contractors can't get a hold of the plumbing inspector. But we try to do our best to rectify that situation. So preparation for the inspection. As far as the installer goes, they got to be prepared. I mean, they got to offer equipment and tools for the plumbing inspector to do their job. It says right that in the rule book. Well, wait a minute, what's going on here? There we go. So that means they can have they got to have the transit hooked up and all that stuff. 9 times out of 10, the plumbing inspector has their own equipment to do their inspection, but it does say in the rule book that the installer shall have the equipment necessary for the inspection to be done. Covering of work. No part of the disposal area can be covered without inspection. This includes the footprint, say you're in stone bed, footprint of the system with stone and pipe, the shoulders which is usually 3 feet, and then the fill extensions. Those are parts of the disposal area. So none of that can be covered without inspection. Defects in materials and workmanship. If there's any, for instance, an infiltrator, if that has a hole in it or some kind of a crack, the installer does not have the authority to repair that. That has to be taken out and a new one must be put in. That's it. That's the bottom line. So you cannot put defect materials in a disposal field, or actually if even a tank or a D box, anything like that, pump station. If there's a defect in that someplace, that's going to be replaced. So interpretation has always been sometimes an issue between, the code book and the installer and the plumbing inspector and us, because, we're thinking of it as one way and maybe somebody else interprets it differently. So, I mean, in cases like that, let's say, if your dog poops, you must pick it up. So that's what he's doing, is what the sign says. But if we were writing that rule, that wouldn't mean that. So if you need clarification on anything, just feel free to give me a call. Anybody in the office a call, and that's my email address, my phone number. That's why I'm here. Feel free to give me a buzz anytime you like, and we can go over any questions that you have. So, inspections. The LPI must make 2 inspections as follows. So the first inspection, basically after the site preparation. So you've got grubbing, which is taking the grass off. And again, that has to be taken off of where the entire disposal area is going, which is the footprint, the shoulder, and the fill extensions. That has to all be grubbed and prepared. As far as the inspections go, you do have your code book, as we all know, what they're supposed to be doing, but you also have the design. We'll kind of touch bases on this a little later, but for instance, if the design says 15 inches of stone, but the code only says 12, you got to inspect it according to the design. So make sure you realize that, and what the site evaluator is designing it for. Any part of the installation that is not consistent, with the design, either, they must correct it, or they have to call the site evaluator to revise their design. So again, just, make sure you're well aware of what the site evaluator is designing according to the rule book. Erosion control, that has to be put up for any work has started. John McLean at DEP has numerous dates for erosion control classes. And I suggest you take one of those if you haven't already, especially the contractors, to become a certified contractor. And I think we'll touch on this later on too, but you need to take this course. We used to put out 8-hour courses, but now there are 4. And so we require one of these courses plus a John McLean course in erosion control, and then 2 front pages of the HHE 200 form that the contractor has installed, signed off by the plumbing inspector. So those 2 certificates, 2 of those pieces of paper, and the form you fill out to become a certified contractor is what we need to put you in the database and get you as a certified contractor. Inspection. Hold on. So, building drain, which is 24 inches. Even though that's outside of the structure, that is still considered internal plumbing. There had to be a cutoff point someplace, and that's where it was. So 24 inches outside of the structure is still internal plumbing. So as a septic system installer, you cannot go past that 24 inches because you're not a master plumber. If you are a master plumber, yes, you can go put it right through the wall of the cement or between the posts or anything. What we're going to be trying to do is Nick Adams, which is the lead of the Plumbers Examining Board. Hopefully sometime this summer, I'm gonna make a suggestion to have the septic system installers be exempt from at least putting it through the wall of a foundation. Because I mean, let's face it, it's being done anyway, so I might as well make it legal. It's not hurting anything, but it's not to code. So if we get them exempt from doing this, then we'll be all set. So that's what we're going to be trying to do. So first thing you need to do, first inspection, make sure it's permitted, of course, because you're not going to go inspect something that's not permitted because it's not authorized to start work on it. So there shouldn't be anything that you should be inspecting. Yeah, we're right in the chat room. So the town of Island Falls is holding a DEP erosion control class next month. So all is welcome. So if you need to, get on DEP, get a hold of John McLean. There's a whole list. And I don't know if Chris has any contact information to put up on the chat board, but hopefully he does, and we'll take it from there when that happens. So yeah, make sure it's permitted first. The next step is, of course, elevation reference point. When you go there with your permitted application, you need to find out where that ERP is. On the design, it shows you where the ERP is. So make sure that that is in the right place. If that's not in the right place, distance, height, and on the right tree or on the right corner of the house or wherever it is, then all your elevations and tie points are going to be off. And if it's not in the right place, you might as well stop right there until that gets done. So make sure it's in the correct place. We just went over. ERP is located in the middle, of the page to the right. That's the old form right there. That's where it's located. The new form, as you can see, is a lot more neater than what the old form is. So hopefully that'll be a lot easier to read. So yeah, page 4. So this right there is it's always set at 0. Wherever that ERP nail is or whatever, there should be an ERP, usually a nail, and they fold a ribbon. So they put the nail through the ribbon and nail it on the tree. So it's, where it is. Plus there's an orange or a pink ribbon or whatever around that tree to notify you this is where the ERP is. All numbers above the ERP is positive. Everything below that ERP is negative. So here's your ERP right there at 0 inches. So that number right there, since it's below the ERP, is a negative number. I've seen positive numbers before, but that was a long time ago. I haven't seen positive numbers in quite some time, which kind of screws up everything if you do have a positive number, because it's hard to, I don't care who you are, unless you do it all the time, it's hard to figure out where the hell it is. So, yeah, excuse me, sorry. But again, below the nail is all negative numbers. So let's say you know, 65 inches above ground, then that ground elevation will be negative 65 below the ERP. Tie points. You got to have the tie points, because if you just had that tie points on that ERP on the right-hand side of the page, and just those two tie points, that system could be located anywhere around that tree. That could go right around in a circle, completely around where that tree is. So that's why you need a second set of tie points, or even sometimes even a third set of tie points. Right there, I mean, just with those two tie points shown before, that locks that field right into place, so you can't move it. With that third set, and it's impossible to move where it's going. So make sure those tie points are there. You know, make sure those are the correct measurements, and you should be all set. So the first inspection. So if you have an ERP established by the site evaluator, and it gets moved, or it gets cut down, or whatever, the only person allowed to reestablish that ERP is the site evaluator that did the design. That's it. Now, as a contractor, they can not move the ERP. They can reestablish the ERP somewhere else where it's more feasible, but that original ERP has to stay there, because that's what the LPI does the inspections on. They won't do the inspections on the transfer of a ERP that the contractor did. It has to be done by the original ERP. So that's why the site evaluator that did the design has to go back and reestablish that, just so everything's the way it's supposed to be. Grubbing. Any part of a disposal area, which is the footprint, the shoulder, and the fill extensions, has to be grubbed. This means all the grass has to be taken off and the soil has to be exposed.
Taking training on poop pipes.
On what?
Poop pipes.
Oh, exciting.
Well,
Any chance you could
you might
run
want
a
to mute yourself.
detailed report on the earned?
I see that John has a question.
Oh, let's see.
John, sorry, I'm having trouble seeing your full name. I think John Gomez, I see that your hand is up.
Go ahead, John, if you got a question. All right, I'm sure he'll pop in sometime.
Yeah, it seems like your microphone isn't working, John, but you're welcome to drop the question in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, and like I said, the disposal area is again, footprint, shoulder, fill extensions. The question is, if a failed septic system is being replaced, do the fill extensions need to be grubbed out again, as they don't seem to be changing? I mean, if the fill extensions go over, like it's bigger than the original one or something, but if it's fitting in the exact same place, then yeah, it should already be grubbed, because all that system would have to come out in the first place. So, which I assume would also be the fill extensions as well. So all that contaminated soil would have to go. So the grubbing would already be done. So I would say, to your question, would be no. But the transitional horizon, everything
Can
would.
you hear me?
Yes.
What can you define the word grubbed? What do you mean by grubbed?
All grass is gone.
Okay, is it rototilled or
Well, I mean, the grubbing is just, okay, grubbing is just basically removing the grass. The transitional horizon would be like with, the backhoe teeth or rototilling, which I do have on the next slide here. Hold on.
oh,
And that's actually mixing the 4 inches of backfill in with it.
okay,
So,
I
yep,
understand.
yep. So those are the two different things.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, like as you said, the transition horizon is just mixing it with the backhoe or the rototiller, 4 inches of backfill material, and get it all mixed in together. So because if you don't have the transitional horizon, it's like if you're taking a glass of water and pouring on top of a desk or a table. It's just going to hit the table and go out to the side. So once the transition horizon is done and it's roughed up and rototilled, or the teeth of the backhoe roughs it up, it goes into the soil slowly. So it does what it's supposed to do. Another comment or question we have is height from the ERP. The designer sometimes needs to use the positive numbers if only available object to trees, buildings, etc. are uphill from the proposed drain field location. This positive number would be captured using a compound transit, and yeah, and lasers. I mean, and that's probably fine. The times that I've ever run into that is very, very, maybe once, put it that way, in the 26 years I've been doing this. But I understand what he's trying to say. I mean, basically, you're going from, ERP to ERP if it's too low. But the whole thing, I mean, you can even use just like in the middle of a field, you can use an ERP with a steel rod and 2 stakes beside it. Something like that, if you have to do that. To ensure install and knows measurements are positive. That's right. They got to use a plus sign. So, but like I said, I mean, and that's probably true, but the times I run into that is very, very, very small. Thanks, John. So, fill extensions, like we said before, also must be scarified and the transition horizon done. It's got to all be roughed up. Like John was mentioning before, if you're replacing it in the same place, all the old contaminated soil has to be removed. And so basically redoing the whole thing anyway, and the whole thing still has to be done. The scarification and the transitional horizon. Rubbing and scarification, there's another picture right there. This one, I believe, yeah, that one is not acceptable. There's way too many rocks and stones in that. A small number and smaller size, wouldn't be too bad, but these are big. These are actually taking up space that the soil effluent could be draining into. And with stuff on top of that, it's actually pushing those bigger stones into the soil. So it's like driving over a leach field when it's scarified. You're compacting the soil, which we don't want to do. Transition horizon. After the transition horizon is done, that is considered the bottom of the bed. So when you go to inspect bottom of the bed, really the transition horizon should already be done. And to find out if they're doing the transition horizon the way they're supposed to, I would just kick it around a little bit. The scarification is a big part. Now you could actually inspect the scarification, then they could do the transition horizon when they mix up everything, and then go back and take a look at the elevation. But either way, the bottom of the bed is what the transition horizon after that's done. Septic tanks. So there's a, if the septic design does not list clarification on it, must the SC correct that? No, because the LPI and the installer is supposed to design and install according to the code book and to the site evaluation. Just like, for instance, if the riser isn't on the septic tank in the design, they still need to put the riser on it according to the rules. But for all the site evaluators that are watching, in the code book, it states what's supposed to be put on each page of the 200 form. So I can't remember right offhand what section it is, but it says page 1, then it has a list. Page 2 has a list. Page 3 has a list. As long as all of those things, according to those specifications, are on the 200 form, the site evaluator is fine. 200 form is also needed to be, if you had any other notes you want done or something like that. But as long as it meets the minimum code, that's what the code is. It's just a book of minimums. So as long as that information that's in the code book is on those 3 pages, you're okay. Is a rate good enough for scarification? No. It's going to be it's got to be turned up. Transition, the teeth of the backhoe, rototiller, it's got to, just like you do in a garden, it's got to be turned up. Section 6, application for disposal permit is where the page requirements are. All right, good, thanks. Section 6. So if you want to look that up as a site evaluator, that's the minimum stuff that's supposed to be on the pages. So septic tanks may be a part of your first inspection. So if it is, and basically how a septic system works, as we probably all know, the waste and the effluent come in, the inlet, of course, go down. The tank actually separates the solids on the bottom, effluent in the middle, and the scum layer or grease on top. Then it goes out into your disposal field. In the rule book, we have this table, which basically is your septic tank size and goes over it. So especially when you have a replacement system, if they're expanding, they already have 4 bedrooms and they have 1,000-gallon tank there, then they got to increase the size of the septic tank if they're expanding to even 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms, especially if they only have a 750, and especially if they only have a metal tank. That doesn't work too well now. So, well, it works good if there's holes in it, but eventually it's going to rust out and you got to replace it. So, inlet connections. This is when you, as a installer or even an inspector, you have to watch out for this. It doesn't happen that often, but sometimes there's a mistake and it happens. It says in the rule book that the inlet pipe has to be flush with the inside of the septic tank. So if that's pushed in, just like that, that goes down. That's where that's stopping. That baffle is going to prevent it from going down inside the tank. So if you pull it back to where it belongs, now, 1 or 2 inches inside the tank is fine. But, if it's flush like that, then of course it has room enough to go down and slip down the side and go down the bottom. But there's been a lot of, well, not a lot, but a handful of issues where the pipe has been pushed up too close to the baffle. And that's what happens. Access openings. So here we are with the risers. This was a 2023 rule change. We had risers put in the rule book, at least 1 that is flush with grade, and that's for mostly to find the septic tank in the first place. And so pumpers won't have to dig it up anymore. We figure by putting the riser in right at the beginning to grade, it would help a lot of people, even site evaluators, find out where the tank is, pumpers find out where the tank is. So this way the pumpers won't charge the customer for digging it up because it's already right there. So we figured it's we got a lot of good feedback about this too, that it does it does make a difference. So there's your septic tank. So one riser to finish grade. Again, this is mainly to help the pumper come in and just figure that out where that is, put that pipe down, and there you go. Excuse me. So, and it doesn't only require one riser to finish grade. If you have a filter or a pump, then you have to have the additional riser. Just by having one of them over the filter or pump doesn't mean that you can delete the middle one. Now, there's been septic tanks. Oh, let me back up for a minute. Let me finish this first. So under the septic tank, you're going to have at least, gravel compaction or something to make sure that septic tank stays level. And because if it's, well, I'll tell you here in a minute. If that septic tank, that's right on page 71, the effluent is level at that point because the tank's level. Now, if the tank was tilted just a little bit, I mean, it's not level, that it's just going to go right through. It's going to go. So there's no, the baffles aren't doing their job, and you're going to get a lot of solids out into either your D box or your field itself. So with installers and inspectors, make sure that tank's level, even both ways, side to side, front to back, because that does make a big difference. So here we go again, building drain, which is 2 feet out. Again, unless you're a master plumber or the homeowner can do this as well. You cannot put that through the house, through the foundation. You got to be either a master plumber at this point. You got to be either a master plumber or the homeowner. So there you go. So then anti-flotation. That's not a big of a thing as it used to be. They do float, as you can see right there, and there is a lot of there's a lot of them that have popped up, especially I believe, and I'll have to double check on this, but I think in our rule book it states any holding tank on a seasonal dwelling has to be pumped out each year. So if they have a high water table in the first place and they have to be pumped out each year, they're going to have to be tied down. Now, I don't know how many of these that have been seen by you guys floating, but it's, basically, here's a picture of one that's strapped down. Usually what happens is there's a concrete pad poured first, bigger than the septic tank, and they put eye bolts in it. Then they put the septic tank down and they just strap it down on the eye bolts. So it has no way of floating up after it's pumped. Let's see. Multiple septic tanks. The bigger one comes first. So if you have to put maybe an expansion or something like that, and they got to put another tank in. If you have a 1,000-gallon tank that's there now, it really shouldn't be an issue because you can put a 1,000-gallon tank after, which is fine. If the structure only has a 750, then that either has to be replaced and 1,000 put in its place, or, in a situation like this, maybe you can put a 2,000 gallon tank in and be done with it. But that the 750 has to come last. The 1,000 has to come first because that's going to collect all the solids, at least most of them anyway. Abandoned septic tanks. As far as those are concerned, first of all, they have to be pumped out, then either crushed or taken, exhumed from the property. Usually people, that's too much work. So usually people pump it and then crush it like this, and then fill it with backfill material, make sure it's compacted. We do not need any kids or pets falling through a septic tank. This is why this has to be done. Or on occasion, people have backed over them when they're not being used anymore. Or even when they're being used, they've backed over them and they've gone right down through it. So if this is part of your design that you're replacing a complete system, make sure it would be very helpful to put on your site evaluator to make sure the existing septic tank, if it's not being used, to be properly abandoned. And that'll take care of that. That'll cover you, and that'll cover the plumbing inspector, because when he goes to inspect it, that has got to be made sure it had to be done. So before he signs off on it, because that's on the design. So that would be very helpful. So your first inspection is now concluded. Is there any questions about a first inspection or the installation of a system at all, as far as the first inspection goes? I mean, it's pretty basic. For those of you who are new, I believe Eli is going to make this available in our bank of seminars, so you can watch it as many times as you want to. And as far as the new people go, feel free to give me a call. I can come help you with anything. So if there's no questions, then why don't let's see.
I see
It's
that
about-
Bruce has a question.
Oh,
If you unmute yourself, Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, Brent, I know that the site design, it should be on there about abandoning the tank and doing what you just mentioned. You also said that it's in the rules. Do you know the specific page for that? Because
I
as
would
I
have-
look at,
well,
as I
you
look
had-
in my code book, when you said page 66 on the septic tank capacity, on mine it's page 70, but I don't know, was there a newer set of codes that was replaced, or, but getting back to my question, I'm sorry.
No, that's
Can you
okay.
tell me where it shows that about abandoning it?
So do you have the 2023 rule book, I take it?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I think if I remember correctly, and maybe Eli can sort this out, but I think that when they first came out, there was like two different printings that were kind of off one or two pages, or something didn't line up. But I'll get back to you on that. But what we're going to do now is probably take just a 15-minute break so you guys can get up and stretch and all that stuff. And when we come back at 10 o'clock, I will have that answer for you where those abandoned septic tanks are.
All right. Thank you, Brent.
You're very welcome. So let's see. Let's see. Anything else? Good enough for clarification. Then the septic tanks. All right, well, I'll look that up. And why don't we come back at about 15 minutes? So 10 o'clock, we'll be doing it. And Eli will be talking about the new forms. And so go get yourself a cup of coffee, stretch for a few minutes, and we'll be right back.
Brent, I went ahead and pasted the abandoned septic tank part into the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Brent, I was wondering if you had a chance to dig into the remote island flow setting question that I threw your way a few weeks ago.
I know there is one, and I know it's policy. Alex hasn't got back in touch with me, but I will remind him again. That's what you wanted to know, right?
Yeah,
Or-
well, so this
okay.
is Mike Jakubowski with the LUPC, and so
Yeah.
you know we deal a lot with the islands, and so it's something I feel like I need to know more about. So
Yeah, okay. I will remind him again today. And if you don't hear from me by the end of the week, give me an email.
you got it.
All right, excellent.
Brent, I missed the answer to the question about scarification on the design. I have a design that doesn't mention scarification. Do I have to get the site evaluator to fix that, or can I, as the LPI, take care of that?
Usually as the LPI, because that is part of the inspection process.
Okay, so
So,
he doesn't
yeah.
have to write it.
Right. Usually sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but, and I'd have to, do you see where it says, what's on page 1, 2, and 3? Is where the page requirement, it's section 6.
Yeah, he
the-
used an old one. I read through this whole thing. I didn't see anywhere where he said scarify.
Well, I mean, in the code book itself, I don't know if it
Oh.
mentions, in
Yeah.
section 6 in the code book, I don't know if it actually mentions scarification. I'd have to look at it myself,
Gotcha.
but I know that is part of the inspection process. So whether or not it's on there, doesn't really matter. You're gonna have still, inspect it according to that. So it'd be helpful if they did, because it, more or less covers them.
Okay. But it
Yeah.
doesn't stop the permit.
No.
Okay. All
Nope.
right. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
Hi, Brett, Bob Costa. Someplace it says about scarifying under the leach field as well as the fill extension. I don't know where it is, but I'm sure I've seen it.
Yeah. And hopefully, I'm sure we all know that it has to be scarified underneath the whole thing. So,
Yes, right. And I haven't seen this in our rules, but when I'm explaining a system to my client, I always talk about lateral diffusion and how our systems work as opposed to percolation, and caution them about putting a road, parallel to the system downhill, how that'll dam it up. And I guess I think my nightmare, and hopefully I can talk to the client before I visit them, is when they have a bulldozer in there and they take off all the soil and they pile it up someplace. And I say, okay, where's the soil? I'm supposed
yeah,
to be
right.
doing a soil test.
Yeah, right. Right. Exactly. It'd be nice if they called you first.
Yes, I've actually had to put a system, a little ways away from the house site because there was no soil.
Yeah.
There was no soil left.
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
all right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
I can't hear anybody talk. Are we still in class or not?
Hi, we are just taking a break in between sections. Just because it's a 4-hour training, we don't want to like lose everybody's attention by like the end. But we will be back and I'll be presenting at 10, so just 5 more minutes.
Thank you.
Also, Brent, I see that there's another question in the chat. Is a permit required to replace a section of pipe between the house and the tank? Is this piping relocation on the HHE 211?
Let's see here. I don't know if everybody's still listening, but what I'll do is I will type the answer in. Let's see everything there.
Hey, Brent,
Yes.
this is Luke Cavelli. Had kind of an interesting one last week. I had a house that was being sold and they did an inspection on the septic, and septic was okay, but the plastic chambers had whole row of plastic chambers had been collapsed. And they wanted to go in and replace them. And I wasn't really sure whether they needed a permit for that or not, but from what I could tell from the rules, permit's not required. They're allowed to make repairs. Now, I did go out and inspect, and the contractor put them back to the original elevations of the original permitted design. Is that proper, or should I have done something different?
Well, no, I mean, since that's all done, that's fine, but usually a repair like wouldn't be considered like a whole row. A repair would be more of a maybe 1, 2, or 3 infiltrators and maybe a section of pipe or something like that. If it's over and above that, I would feel that they would have to call the site evaluator in. And if the site evaluator isn't around anymore, they would have to get another site evaluator to do another design just to make sure everything's still the way it's supposed to be. How old was the system? Do you know?
Oh boy, I don't remember, but fairly old, because it was back when plastic infiltrators were fairly new. And I
Okay.
guess some of those had been recalled at some point. We think that's why that row collapsed.
Yeah, probably. I bet you. I bet you that's what happened. But I mean, if they got it back up and, now that it's already done, if they got it back up and it's working fine, then that's okay. But I mean, I would say just keep in the back of your head that what a repair really is. I mean, I wouldn't have to. How many rows was there? Do you know?
There were 3 rows originally, only
Okay.
1 was replaced.
Okay.
The others all
So-
seemed okay.
All
And
right.
the soil was dry as a bone. I don't think it was going much past the first 2 anyways, so.
Yeah. But according to that would be, that's 1/3 of the whole disposal area. So I would say if it happens again somewhere else or whatever, I would just have a site evaluator called in because just to make sure it's still, lack of a better term, is with today's rules, like the soils and all that stuff. I mean, who knows what they designed back then? Did you have documentation of it?
Oh, yeah, I have the original
Okay.
design. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and if do you know by any chance if whoever did the design is still around?
I think it was Mike Gramlich, but I can't remember for sure. I
Okay.
think he's still around, but I think he's
Yeah.
semi-retired.
Yeah. I mean, if it is like in that case, I mean, just to make sure that, everything is still up and up, I would have them give like Mike a call, and even if he just got his old documentation and then just, put on there someplace that, number one row was reestablished, and then, at least his documentation of that, or did you document what went on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I took pictures and stuff, but then
Yeah.
I put it in the file, what happened, so
Okay.
something
right.
happens to me, at least somebody will know.
Yes. Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things anyway. So, yeah, I mean, I think you covered it okay. If it was me, what I would have done was just have Mike involved in it too. So, but that's fine. That's neither here nor there. But maybe in the future, just keep that in the back of your head.
Okay.
Yep, that'll be fine. And like I said, if it's one, two, or three little infiltrators or whatever, that's not a big deal. But like in your case with the, replacing 1/3 of a disposal field, it just in my head, I don't count that as a repair. I think that's you're replacing a whole row. So I would just like, if I was a plumbing inspector, I would like to have backup on it. So that's why I would get the site evaluator involved.
But when there is a repair like that, there's no official documentation or permit required, right?
Not under what, like 1, 2, or 3 infiltrators
Yeah.
or something like that? No. Nope.
Yeah. All right. Been riding?
I haven't got out yet.
You need to. Weather's perfect.
Been too busy.
Yeah, I know. I get it.
And you're not supposed to be that busy, just not go right.
All right, it is a little after 10, so I think our break is done. I will be presenting on just a little bit more of the subsurface wastewater unit, the new forms, or the newly updated forms really, and then a bit on the website and the permit search database. While I do that, Brent, I see that there's a question in the chat. Would you mind responding to it in the chat while I'm presenting?
Yeah, let's see.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
So within the state, the subsurface wastewater is kind of in a weird place in the agencies. Sometimes people think that we're the EP. So I wanted to just run through where we actually are in the state, just to give people a sense of things. So we're a unit within the drinking water program, which is part of the Division of Environmental and Community Health. This includes other programs like the radiation folks or the health inspection program. That is all under the CDC, which is part of the DHHS agency. And within the drinking water program, there's a number of units. Most of them obviously are drinking water related, but there's also us and subsurface. And the drinking water program has about 55 people, and then the subsurface wastewater unit are just 5 folks within that. So I have all of the folks in subsurface listed here with just some bullets of like 2 of the things that they do, the things that you're probably most likely to email or call us about. But obviously we all do a lot more than just 2 things. So Alex Pugh is the manager of the subsurface wastewater unit. He also does the engineered system review and the minimum lot size review. So he's the best person for questions on those 2 things. You guys know Brent, so I don't really need to go over him too much, but Pretty much any question that you have, Brent can answer. He's been with the program for like 26 years. Then there's me. I do some of the permit processing and permit retrieval from the Subsurface Wastewater Permit database. I also am the person who sends out the gov deliveries. I tend to be the person who updates it, forms, stuff like that. Any kind of communication or long-term project is usually me. Barrett also processes the permits. He does them more on the rolling basis, where I tend to do more of like the large submittals. He also does permit retrieval from the database, and he does cemeteries and crematoria. And then lastly, there is April. She covers all of the private well questions that we get. And she is also the person now in charge of installer and inspector certification. So if you ever have any questions about when your certification is expiring, what you need for your certification, April is the best person to ask for that. For site evaluator licensing, I believe Brent is still the best person, but April could also help you if you have questions. So jumping into the forms. As most people probably have heard by now, the HHE 200 and HHE 204 forms are now available. I have been passing out the forms during our presentations, and since this is a virtual one, can't really do that. But let me drop the link to this website in the chat so you guys can pull up the forms if you want to. There you go. That's a web page that we created specifically around the release of these new forms. So it has PDFs of the HHE 200 and the 2.0 form, as well as AutoCAD versions of the 200. And it has some of the training that we initially released around it, as well as some frequently asked questions. Hi, Bruce. I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, on this slide presentation that you're giving,
Yeah.
and as far as that goes, all the other stuff that Brent is talking about, physical pages, is that available to us besides the PowerPoint?
So, like, are you looking for the forms in particular? What exactly do you mean that you're looking for besides the PowerPoint?
I've noticed on Brent's class that he's giving, which is great. There is new pages as to the older training that I have been attending right along. And it's nice study guide material to have to go over and over again versus the PowerPoint. And yours, I have already gotten into it. The site designers are starting to use the new HHE 200, which I really like a lot better than the old. But I was just wondering, that layout where you first started, the department heads and all that, if I go to that site initially where I can get the 200 and the update on the 204, will that be somewheres in that page?
No, I only have that on the PowerPoint, which would be in the training webpage that I sent earlier in the chat. Happy to send that again. But if you would like just a PDF of who's in the unit put somewhere on the website, we could probably do that.
Okay.
I will make a note of that.
Yep, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Our contact information is on like the DWP part of the website, which is not the easiest to find because it's not actually on the subsurface pages. Oh, thank you for posting that. Okay, I've added that as a task for myself after this. Jumping back into the forms. I'm going to cover the 204 form first, just because it's a little bit simpler, and then we'll do the 200. So the 204 is the variance form. It used to be just a 2-page form. We have now added this 3rd page, but really we've more added this back. This used to be part of the form. It was taken out at some point, And during the discussion period for this, we decided to add it back in. Brent and Alex in particular find it very useful when they're doing variance reviews for state approval. This is the new front page. Some of the things that we changed in here, we added a email line, which didn't exist before. And I think all of the other information was previously in here and it just got a little bit reformatted. This section for noting why the variance is being requested was increased, so there's more space to add notes. And that was pretty much it for the first page changes. On the second page, we reformatted these a little bit. The prior form had just kind of like 3 boxes, and we felt like it didn't differentiate between just an LPI variance and an LPI and state variance enough. So we added the black headers and the boxes to try and format that a bit more. The information in those boxes didn't change much between forms. The main thing that did change on page 2 is just references to the rules. The 2023 rules, things had to be restructured, so a lot of the section numbers changed, so they were no longer in date on the old form. They've all been updated. They all now refer to the correct sections. And then this is the third page. This is entirely new, but also, you know, like I said, kind of old. This section, the setbacks, that's all just pulled from the rules. It was just formatted to fit onto this page. Again, all of the references to the rules in the notes area have been updated, and there's a nice bid box for adding any additional notes. Any questions on the 204 before I move on to the 200? There pretty much never are. So the 200 has changed more than the 204 did. Essentially, we've taken the old first page and split it in 2. The new first page is really more information gathering on the property owner, the property, and the information that you would need to charge the permit. And we'll get into the specifics of these on the next slide. This is just an overview. Page 2 is more of the information on the actual septic system itself. That's pretty much all the stuff that was at the bottom of the old page 1. And then pages 3 and 4 are largely the same as old pages 2 and 3. You can even see that they're pretty much the same. It's just a little bit of reformatting, trying to make those boxes bigger. But otherwise, the information on these pages didn't really change. One of the larger changes that we made for this form was adding what we've been referring to as alternate page 3. If any of you have ever filled out the engineered permit form, then you're familiar with the front page of that, which is basically like a checklist where you, as like a site evaluator, you would affirm that you've attached all of these pages with all this information to the front page of the permit. That's basically how this alternative page 3 functions as well. It's a checklist and a couple of information gathering boxes so that you can attach larger site plan drawings to the form and essentially like affirm that it's that you have all the same information. And we'll get more into the details of that in some of the slides, but we also created just a blank page. So you could use this whole page to do your site design rather than just the small box on pages 3 or 4. Now going into the details a little bit, this is the top of page 1. A couple of things that we added include the house number for the permit. This makes it a lot easier to find things in our database. So we created a box just to try and promote actually adding house numbers, which some folks do, some folks don't currently. The municipal tax map and lot number used to be on the right side of the page. That's been moved over to the left side. Again, this is to help with entering permits into the state database, just because all that information is stacked. It'll be easier for us to read. We added an email box to the property owner section. The form, the last big update to this form, I think, was in like the 90s-ish, and it didn't include email, and the previous little iterations haven't included it either. Most people use that nowadays, so we've added it. The installer information box is new. We are going to be releasing a small update to the 200 probably this week or next week. One of the things that we are changing is the installer information box. So now it says installer information parentheses for town use only. The idea of this section was to make it easier for town staff to take down the information of the installer so that they can arrange the inspections. This is not meant for the property owner to say who's installing their form. And that's specifically because the property owner might not know who's going to be installing their form when they get the application permitted, since, you know, it can take 2 years before installation actually begins. So this is for the town. It's meant to make things a little bit easier for inspections. It does not need to be filled out. The state will accept the form if the installer information box isn't filled out. We've added a second line for the inspection signature. Prior to this, there was a single inspection signature line and 2 date lines. Now we just have signature and date for both. And we've added this new area for fee calculation, as well as a couple of notes that we notes for fee-related things that we often see. Things like reminding towns that their doubled fees are kept by the towns and the state just gets 25% of the like base fee. That's the main changes for the top of the page. One thing I forgot to mention is that our address is now in the top right corner. This is our correct address. This is where you should mail your permits to. Prior to now, that hasn't been on the permit, and sometimes submissions go elsewhere. So that was a really big, useful change. Going down to the bottom of the page, we have kept a couple of system-related things in this section. Type of application, variance requirements, and treatment tanks are all here, as well as the disposal system components. In the in the type of application, we just added minor and major to the less than 25 and more than 25% expansion. We didn't change the variance requirements section at all. And in the treatment tank section, we changed it just a little bit. We've added total number of new tanks. We've been seeing more and more permits where more than 1 tank is being installed at a time. For pricing, that changes things. And it was sometimes hard to tell how many new tanks were actually being installed. So that's why we've added this box. And we've also added a larger notes box for any tank related notes and a little checkbox about the risers. On the disposal system component side, this will be a general trend that you see in this section, is that we added a new box to specify the total number of new tanks. Again, this is to help with the fee calculation for the town and the state. So if you were just installing a complete non-engineered system, what this would look like is checking off 1 and just writing 1 here. If you were installing the system with 2 tanks, you would check off 1 and write 2 tanks. For the primitive/limited system gray water, which is a gray water plus an alternative toilet, we've added a specify type for the alternative toilet here. There's always been a specify type for line item 3 alternative toilet, so we just copied that. We've added a note next to non-engineered treatment tanks, which is parentheses 750 gallons or over. This is, again, just how we price things. And there is a little asterisk that comes down to here that notes that any tank over 750 qualifies as a non-engineered tank. So that includes grease interceptors, pump tanks, as well as just your normal kind of septic tanks. And again, there's a box noting how many new tanks were installed. For complete non-engineered systems, we have number of new disposal fields, new tanks, and number of pumps. Again, this is just comes down to helping us with pricing. For line item 8, engineer tanks, number of new tanks was also added. We added a specify box for miscellaneous components. And then one of the bigger changes to this section is that we broke pre-treatment components out into 2 different line items. Now line item 11 is the pre-treatment tanks. So that's like your, I always mix up these 2. I think it's your Fuji Clean tanks. It's your or advanced treatment tanks. And those have a $150 fee to them. And line item 12 is your pre-treatment components. This is like your white knight or like something that's being installed in a tank. And that has the same fee as a miscellaneous component, which is $30. And we have another little double asterisk down here. That double asterisk is next to both of the pre-treatment things because there is a new pre-treatment section on page 2. So that just says details on page 2. And nothing has changed with the site evaluator statement. This is the top of page 2. Aside from formatting and kind of repositioning these fields, nothing really has changed with most of these other than adding a little bit more space whenever there's something to specify or calculate. I will say one of the other changes that is going to be on the little revision that we put out this week or next week, you'll see here it just says load. We're going to make sure that that says H20 load. And this says linear feet. I think that there was another spot in the form where it said acres instead of linear feet, and that's been corrected. Looking at the bottom of page 2, there are more changes here. So we have a nice large additional notes box. One of the thoughts behind adding this box here was that we see site evaluators who hand draw their systems writing notes in the kind of gridded areas of pages 3 and 4. And over multiple rounds of scanning through the town and the state, sometimes those get a little difficult to read. So we added this box so that there's another place to put those notes that will kind of live longer through rounds of scanning. And then totally new is this pre-treatment / advanced treatment system section. Pretty simple, just make, model, and any notes about the pre-treatment, as well as a box here for checking if there's a maintenance contract required. And this little checkbox was a direct request from a site evaluator. I just think it is really smart. Those are the main changes to page 2. Additionally, at the top of all these pages, we've added an owner and address spot just in case things get like separated. But that's, you know, pretty simple. And they will, if you're using the PDF, those will autofill once you fill them in the first time. I'm not going over pages 3 and 4. Like I said, they are very, very similar to what those old pages used to look like. So there's just not much to go through. But I did want to go through alternative page 3 a little bit more. So again, we have the check boxes here. They are for things like the site location map, the site plan, soil profile description, disposal area, cross-section, backfill, ERP, etc. Some of those checkboxes refer to things that are just on this page. So you would just fill out this section and then check that box. For other ones like the site plan or the site location map, those are things that you would be drawing up and attaching to the permit. So you would have those pages done, you would staple them to the permit, then you would check that box. So that's how those checkboxes are meant to work. And we added a site evaluator signature spot here. The language that's above it is very similar to the language that's on the first page. It's basically just saying that I, as the site evaluator, affirm that I have attached all of the information that is required of me. And then they print their name and sign it. And then here's the bottom of that page. again, these are just sections that are pulled from pages 3 and 4 directly. So I see that there's a question. If someone is proposing to add a pretreatment component to an existing tank instead of doing an extension to the leach field, is that allowed? Does the site evaluator have to be involved, or can it be permitted on the HHE 200 as a pretreatment component? That is a better question for Brent, I think. Just because it's a little bit more technical. If you're asking me how much it costed, I could tell you. But I'll let Brent answer that. A couple of frequently asked questions that we've gotten on this form. The state isn't requiring that anyone switch to these forms before 2028. After January 1st of 2028, permits can no longer be permitted on the old form. So if a permit was designed this year and the property owner didn't get that application permitted until 2028, then that design would need to be put onto the new form. So we are encouraging everyone to switch over sooner rather than later, but it's technically not required until 2028. We also picked 2028 because any systems designed in 2025 shouldn't be affected by this. A couple of quick no's. You do not need to reapply or resubmit any existing permits onto the new form. Fees have not changed. The internal plumbing permit 211 has not changed, and the replacement tank permit 200A also has not changed. It's just these two forms. And I covered this already, but with the installer box again, that's really meant more for towns in town use, and it doesn't have to be filled out. It's just meant to make things a little bit easier for the town. And I've also mentioned this, there is a small revision coming out. As always with the state, early May was a little bit not accurate in how long it actually took. But those edits are done. I am just having a colleague look at them and put them into the CAD form, and those will all go out on to the HHE 200 training page, as well as any other place where the forms are linked on our website. Again, most of these changes are really small. It's things like making sure that all of the units are correct, correcting typos, stuff like that. And a list of those changes will be included when we put that up. Probably we'll send a little gov delivery. Any questions on the new forms before I move on? I'm not seeing any, but you're always welcome to drop them in the chat if you have them. I wanted to go over the subsurface wastewater website. We have a lot of resources here, but it can be kind of annoying to navigate. So I just wanted to let you guys know where certain things were, especially since the website was updated last year when DHHS updated their whole website, which obviously included us. So the hydrology and wastewater is technically our landing page. That's what you're seeing here. The next couple of slides are going to go through the different pages that are in this left-hand menu. So you'll see that left-hand menu here. The hydrology and wastewater page is what we were just on. The wastewater, subsurface wastewater unit page is probably what's going to come up if you Google us. And then the cemeteries and crematoria page is also in this list if you have to deal with any of that kind of stuff. I imagine that most of you are probably not ever really going to go to any of these three pages, but this is just what they are. Pages that you are probably more likely to go to is our policy page, which is where we upload any policies that are related to the subsurface wastewater rules. And then this next page is a link to the subsurface wastewater disposal rules. This is the official link for the state. And this page also has some notes about what changed in 2023. These pages are probably the two that you are most likely to visit and that are most likely to have useful resources for you guys. So the first one is the municipal office resource page. We built this with town clerks, town administrative staff specifically in mind. It goes over what is required for permit submission, but it also has a list of all of our forms and documents. So the permits that I've been talking about are on here, as well as other the HHE 200 is here. All of that kind of stuff is on this page. And then the subsurface wastewater licensing and certification page has information on all of the licensing and certification processes that we oversee. We've recently reformatted it, so it should be a little bit easier to navigate and to read. In addition to that information, we have lists of all of the active site evaluator, installer, and inspector licenses and certifications, as well as a list of all of the active LUPC LPIs for the different territories. And then at the very bottom of that is our training schedule. This is where this training was linked, as well as all of the other trainings that we've been doing. And that's also where you're going to find the recording of this. And I think I dropped that page in the chat a little bit earlier, if you were to scroll up. And one quick note on the installer certification. When we were redoing this page, we changed this a little bit. It used to be a full 8-hour subsurface training session. We just don't really do 8-hour training sessions anymore. So we've changed it so that it's now just a 4-hour session like this training, plus a DEP erosion control course. And I believe recertification has not changed. And then the last 3 pages are really meant more so for the public. Subsurface wastewater permitting and variances to the wastewater system disposal rules are more of like walkthroughs for the public, homeowners who are trying to get this stuff done for their houses. And then our last page is just a resources page. Most of it is like FAQs for homeowners, tips for septic systems, but at the very bottom of that page is where our permit search is. So this is what that looks like at the bottom of our page. You'll see here is the big red button to start your search. And I'm going to be going through that in a second, but everything that I'm about to cover is also outlined here in the bottom. So if you ever wanted to reference it again, that's where it is. So last section that I'm presenting on is the permit search database. We've heard from some folks that this new database can be a little bit difficult to navigate, and I totally understand that. This database, I think we've been using for about 2 years now. The prior one, I think that this database is better than the prior one, because the prior one, sometimes you would look things up and the permits would not be available, which is not a problem that we've had with this database. The problem is usually more about finding them. I see that there's a question in the chat, so I'm just going to pause. Is there a place to look up contractors/installers to make sure that they are certified? There is an installer list on that licensing and certification page, and you can look up whether their certification is active or expired. But in most cases, the state doesn't require that installers are certified. I think it's just in, you know what, actually, I'm going to pause. That might not be true. I might have that backwards. I'm just going to the website to double check. Sorry, I mixed up installers and inspectors. I meant to say, in most cases, inspectors are not required to be certified except for properties that include a septic system located in the shoreland zone when the property is being transferred. But like Brent said in the chat, getting a site evaluator involved so that all bases is covered is always a good idea. Okay. Back to the permit search database. This is the first page that you would see when you click on that red box. This is the front end of the permit search. And we always suggest being pretty broad with your search at first. And by that, I mean just putting in the town and the date range that you're looking for. And when I'm putting in a date range, if somebody tells me that their septic system was installed in like 1985, I will usually bump that to a range of about 3 years on either side. So I'll do like 1982 to 1988. And that's because a permit can be permitted up to 2 years before installation begins. So installation might have happened in 85, but sorry, chat. But the permit might have been permitted in like 83. And that would be in our database for 83. So that's why we suggest doing a year range. And then I would not put in anything else for any of the other categories here, and just keeping it really broad. So say you do that, you hit search, and then you have a huge number of permits to look through, or maybe not, depending on what town and what your year range is. The best thing to do from here is to use the filter tab, or the filter button at the top of each of these tabs. In particular, we recommend using the filter, which is this little funnel icon at the top of the file name tab. This file name column is exactly the file names that things were stored in the old database. So if you were used to the old database and you did Control F a lot in it to find permits, this is what you would do. This is pretty much like the same process for that. This works best for permits that were in the old database, which is most of the permits in this one. So that's permits generally from 1974 to about 2019. Any permits after 2019 have been hand entered into the new database, and they don't have a file name from the old database. But all of their other information is a little bit more accurate and filled out than it is for some of these older permits, just because the migration, it worked really well for some of the permits, but it was a little bit wonky for other ones. You can see here, like there's map numbers that are just names. And we're going through and we're correcting those, but there's, I don't know, I think there were about 350,000 permits that were migrated, and we have to do corrections by hand. So we're working through it. But let's say that you have clicked on this filter. This is what's going to pop up on your screen. And you would enter your keyword into this box. So in this case, I'm going to look for a permit that's on Spring Road. And the best way to do it is to do apostrophe spring apostrophe. These apostrophes basically, these are not apostrophes, sorry, these asterisks. These asterisks basically tell the database to give me all of the results where the keyword is included. So I'm going to get results where it's like 125 Spring Road, and also results that are just Spring Road, or results that are like, it might be Route 1 and then the person's name is Spring. So it gives me all of those results. And if you don't include the asterisks, you might only get the results that start with Spring. So anything with a house number wouldn't show up. So that's why we suggest using the asterisks. So let's say we have then hit apply, and we have a good number of permits that came up for, they're mostly on Spring Road. We could narrow this down even more. In most cases, you're probably going to get less than 20 permits show up, in which case you could just go through all of them. But if you have additional keywords, something that you can do is Spring and the property owner's last name. In this case, it's Spring and Malloy. And again, we're using those asterisks on both of those words. We use and here. It tells the database that we are looking for a file name that has both the name Spring and the name Malloy. You could theoretically do like Spring or Malloy, and that would bring up anything that was like probably on Spring Road, or anything that has a property owner whose name is Malloy. You'll also notice here that it says no entries found. DocuWare likes to lie. I don't know why DocuWare lies. This is not always true. I would always suggest, if you see no entries found here, to click apply anyway. And if nothing comes up, then we don't have anything. But more I don't know, more frequently than not, I will see this and I will click apply and I will still find permits. And you'll see in this case, I clicked apply and there was a permit in this database for Spring and Malloy. And then, you just pull it up and you can download it from here. A couple of things that I find really helpful when looking for permits in this database is just remembering that they are filled out by people. Names get misspelled, roads get misspelled. Sometimes people will name their driveways like it's a road. So instead of, just having the main road, it will be like Smith Drive. And just a lot of these permits, not all of the identifying information gets filled out, especially the older ones from like the 70s to 90s. Most of them don't have house numbers. So when you're searching, you really need to know who the property owner's name is or like have a more specific year range because it can be kind of hard to find. If you don't have that information, most of these permits do have a site location drawing on them, and you can always look at the site location and kind of compare it to a map to see where the property is relative to other landmarks on the street. And then the other thing is that permits are old. So sometimes road names change, or a permit will be built in the 80s and an actual road will be built in the 90s. So sometimes the road will be kind of like a larger road than like the smaller road that the house is actually on, if that makes sense. Again, a lot of these permits don't have house numbers. And if you're looking for a permit that's kind of like off a road or is on kind of like a small unnamed street, searching just like off with two asterisks can sometimes pull it up. Searching private road or right of way, which is sometimes abbreviated to ROW. Sometimes those things can pull it up. That's what I'll start doing if I'm like really not seeing anything during a search. And then the other thing is that usually people will come to you and they will use colloquial names for roads. But more often than not, permits are filed under state and federal names. So like if you were looking for a permit on Mill Street, you might actually want to search Route 1 instead. And I believe that is all I have for you on permit related things. Are there any questions about the forms, about the database, about the website? I'm not seeing any of them. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat or hearing any questions. So the last section of the presentation is going to be done by Brent. I think we're going to take another short break in between sections.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, it's not really a question, it's a statement.
Mm.
So, being a land surveyor, I'm often at the Registry of Deeds, and many of the registries are online. So, in terms of what you mentioned about the roads, of course, you want to know who the owner was at the time. And so you're going to have to look for predecessors in title. The person that, lives there now may not be the person for whom the Site Evaluator designed the system. And if you go to the registry, you can do deed research. And if you're not familiar with it, the registrar will help you use their system. I know Washington County is real good that way. But the problem is it's going to add time to what you're doing. And you might want to take that into consideration when, thinking about billing. But anyway, that's a real, I get many calls, people buying a house and they want to know, something about the system, and the house may have changed hands 2 or 3 times. And sometimes it's not at the town hall. And talking about the town hall, those folks up here, they're really helpful for historical information, like, road name changes and stuff like that. So anyway, I hope those 2 pieces of information are helpful to you.
Yeah, that's great, Bob. Thanks for sharing those.
You're welcome.
That also reminded me, I forgot to say, but we don't have any permits from before 1974 in our database. That's just because of when the state started requiring towns to send permits to us. So anything from before then, there's usually not really a record for it unless it's like saved with the deed or something like that. But anyway, I did say that we were going to take a break. Brent, I don't know if you're here and if you want to weigh in, but I was thinking maybe just a 10-minute break this time, and we'll
Yeah,
have
that sounds
everyone
good.
back at 12:55 and we'll finish up.
You got it.
Well, we'll finish up with Brent's presentation. Great, thanks. I see you have a question.
I'm just trying to find out if everything is okay now with the course here.
With the what? Oh, with the course? Yeah, we're
Is
just
every-
on a, yeah, we're
Okay.
just on a little break. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Just giving people a chance to use the bathroom, stretch their legs.
All right.
Brent will be doing a section on ADUs and also the second inspection. Speaking of Brent, I think you need to take control back over for the PowerPoint.
All right, let me try it now. See what happens.
Excellent.
Hey. All right, so it's 10:55, here we go. So ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Says it right in the name, accessory. You have to have a primary dwelling unit in order to have an accessory dwelling unit. Just like with bunkhouses. Bunkhouses are an accessory to a primary structure, primary dwelling unit. And with bunkhouses, you cannot have plumbing in them. They are just bunkhouses. Once you put plumbing in them, they become a dwelling unit. So they have no plumbing. So bunkhouses are an addition to the disposal field, 20 gallons per day per bed. And yeah, I cannot stress enough, no plumbing. So ADUs. So there's your 3-bedroom dwelling unit. There's your septic tank, 1,000-gallon septic tank. And there's your disposal field. First time criteria, stone disposal field, 270 gallons per day. 90 gallons per day per bedroom, times 3 bedrooms, 270 gallons a day. So here comes your accessory dwelling unit. Somebody wants to put in. That has to have first time criteria. And it has to be a minimum of 2 bedrooms. So once you put that in, can you do that? Let me see some answers in the chat box. Can you hook it up to the existing 1,000-gallon tank? Right, the tank is too small. Right now you have a total of 5 bedrooms. So that tank has got to be larger than that. That's got to handle five bedrooms. So let's say you put a 750-gallon tank in before the 1,000-gallon tank. Can you do that? We talked about that earlier. No. That's right, because as we know, the biggest tank has to come first. Now, another thing you could do, maybe, can you do that with the expansion, 750, in line before it goes to the field? Yes, you can. So that covers that dwelling unit, and that covers the expansion that they got to expand by 2 bedrooms. Now, if you did that, that expansion still has to meet the first time criteria, because that is a brand new dwelling unit. So that's got to be first time criteria. So as long as that expansion that's on that slide right there meets first time criteria, like for instance, 100 feet away from a well, they can do that. So let's say it's not first time criteria anymore. That existing system was under replacement criteria. Can you hook that accessory dwelling unit to that field? One of the questions was, can they reduce the house to a 2-bedroom, then use the existing tank? That's completely up to the town and up to the assessor, what they want to do. If they can go backwards from a 3 to a 2-bedroom, then maybe they could do it that way. So you got replacement.
But
Yep,
Brent,
go ahead.
you're up to a 4-bedroom now. When you have 2 2s, that's a 4-bedroom.
That's right.
Okay. So you couldn't use that system if it was only a 3-bedroom.
That's right. What he was asking, if you could reduce that 3 to a 2-bedroom, if
Yes.
you could do that.
But you still have to expand the system though.
Yes, you still have to expand the system. And
Okay.
I just thought of this as well. It says in the rule book, each dwelling unit has to have a minimum, it has to have their own tank. So that would say to me, each dwelling unit would have to have at least a 750. So that still puts that up to a 1250, a 1500. I mean, if you wanted to do it that way. If I understand that right. So for instance, let's say that 3-bedroom house right there that you're looking at. Let's say the town says, yeah, okay, we can reduce it down to a 2-bedroom. We'll knock that other bedroom off. So your tax records will only say 2-bedroom dwelling unit. And if you do sell it, that's what it would have to be sold as. So you have a 1,000-gallon tank going to a 2-bedroom, which is great, which is fine. Then you have another dwelling unit going into the existing 1,000-gallon tank. Now, by all rights, yes, that is 4 bedrooms, but the code says each dwelling unit has to have their own septic tank of 750, because that's the minimum size tank you could put in the ground. So let's say that does have to happen, then you still couldn't do that, because that 1,000-gallon tank would still be too small. And if you still decided to put that 750 in that ADU going into that 1,000-gallon tank, that would be a violation against the rules too, because you could have the biggest tank come first. So I think the safest way to do that, yes, instead of 2 750s, you can do a 1,500. So let's say you replace that 1,000-gallon tank with a 1,500-gallon tank. Then yes, you probably could do it that way, tie that right into that 1,500-gallon tank, because that meets the capacity of what you're supposed to have, and that also meets a code book that you got to have a minimum of 750 per dwelling unit. So I think that would work as well. There's so many different scenarios, as you guys know, that I'm just giving you a couple of them that usually would be the first things that they would have to do. So I think the way we made this slide, the way it is, to me, and it's only one way of doing stuff, it would be better if you put a 750 on that ADU and tied it into that inlet pipe going into the field after, when you expand that field. That would be the safest way to do it. And let's say, but like where we are now, with that existing slide, that's a replacement criteria. The site evaluator would have to find a place for that ADU that meets first time criteria. That cannot be tied into a replacement system criteria septic tank field. Because of course, like we said, it needs first time criteria. What if it's an attached ADU addition to the house? Does that need a new tank as well? It doesn't need a new tank. It doesn't need its own tank because it's attached to the primary dwelling unit. Basically, now you're looking at kind of like an in-law apartment. So that can be hooked up to the same system, same tank. But again, as long as that tank is big enough, if you got a 4-bedroom dwelling and you put an attached ADU, in-law apartment, into it, that tank's not going to be big enough. Now, would that meet a minor expansion? Yes, it would, because it's less than 50% of what's there. Tank capacity must meet requirements for the occupancy. If the occupancy increases and the tank isn't big enough, oops, I'm just reading the chat here. Let's see. The occupancy increases and the tank isn't big enough, an additional tank for larger tank capacity would be necessary. Yes. Remember this if the ADU is going to serve as a short-term rental. That's a whole nother different thing. Like it said in the chat box, adjusted design flow. Now, this is only if they tell you as a site evaluator if this is going to be rented out. So you don't know that. I mean, there's in-law apartment is what it's called. It's supposed to be for the in-laws. But you know as well as I do, if that does happen, and God forbid, once they have passed on, what's going to happen to that in-law apartment? Of course, it's going to be rented out. So it's hard to, this, as far as the site evaluator goes, you're only as good, you only can draw a good design is if they tell you everything that's going on, which sometimes happens, sometimes it doesn't. So, as a site evaluator, you just do the best you can at what you see. And as far as for short-term rentals, must be higher. This isn't in the rule book, but we suggest at least an extra bedroom, an extra 90 gallons per day. As a site evaluator, you can do whichever one you want. But if you are going to do an adjusted design flow, at least another bedroom added on just to protect everybody. So yeah, that slide right there, if it doesn't meet first time criteria, you're going to have to find a place for that ADU to hook into. So let's say if the distance to a water supply is the only thing that's getting in the way. Remember, there is a table 8A, in our rule book that says if you have a certain amount of casing, you can get closer to the disposal area, the disposal field. Now, this is a like a sleeve. If you put a sleeve in a well and get down to one of those feet you need to get down to, that's fine. And that's not a variance because that table is in the rule book. So it's not considered a variance to the rules because that is part of the rules. So let's see. If you have a system like that and you got a well, and right now as it sits, you go on the property and that system is 100 feet away from that well. So the only way you can expand that is on this side. So now that brings it to 80 feet. You can use that table to get enough casing in there to make 80 feet. And basically that would be considered a first time criteria. So that would work if you could do it that way. I don't know what the benefits are for going through all of that process to have an ADU, but I guess that depends on what your situation is, and you take it from there. See, what is the design flow requirement for a detached structure with a bedroom and bathroom, but no kitchen or laundry? We call that a detached bedroom. A detached bedroom can have a bathroom in it, but no kitchen. And that's an extra 90 gallons per day. Let's see, what else we got here? Always designed for the highest possible occupancy, which is very good to go by. Let's see. So one of the answers was a minimum is 180 gallons a day. That is a minimum of 180 gallons a day is true for a 2-bedroom, even if it's a 1-bedroom. But we do have in the rules what we call, is in the definitions, a detached bedroom. Not a detached structure, a detached bedroom. And that can have a bathroom in it, but no kitchen. And that is an extra 90 gallons per day. Let's see, detached bedroom is great to know about. Yeah, I mean, that's helped out a lot of people. So they wouldn't have to do a lot of stuff. But the problem is you got to watch yourself because that cannot turn into a dwelling unit ever. And if you happen to come across a detached bedroom design, I would make sure that it just in there someplace that you will give them a permit for this as a plumbing inspector, but I would also have a stipulation that this cannot be turned ever into a dwelling. The detached bedroom design. I do not agree with the detached bedroom design designation to be 90 gallons per day. And that's fine, but that is in the rule book as 90 gallons per day. But like I said, no, nobody inspects after the construction. I agree with that 100%. But that's why I said, if you have it as a stipulation in your permit and they go into a dwelling unit, not all this other stuff in it, and something happens, you just, flick that stipulation out and say, listen, this will never be able to turn into a dwelling unit. You violated, you have a notice of violation. Everything that you've caused by this is totally on you. Really, that's the only thing you can do. And I know adding a kitchenette is easy. That's correct. It's also, if in this situation, a violation. And that's why we put that in the rule book. So LPIs would have some kind of teeth that they can sink into that, it's not supposed to be a dwelling unit. Now, everything happens. Just like we had before, people turned bunkhouses into, put a toilet and a sink in. Now you have 2 dwelling units, but that's not caught. That wasn't caught until the LUPC. Somebody sent in a NERPA permit. They wanted to expand, and then they went and did a site visit. Now it's caught. Now, either what's going to have to happen is those camps with the plumbing in it, plumbing will have to be taken out along with each one of those holding tanks. That's the only way they can do it, because I don't think minimum lot size is now going to come into play. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to come into play. And this all started off from the site evaluator put down in their 200 form 2 bunkhouses with toilets and sink, 1 toilet, 1 sink per bunkhouse, and each one of them a holding tank. And the plumbing inspector permitted it. So it wasn't, the person that owned the property's fault. He did everything he could and did everything the right way. He got permitted. And still, that was back in 2005. And it still wasn't caught. 20 years later, it was caught. So, that's quite a bit of time. So yeah, stuff slips through the cracks, so to speak. Like me, there's only one of me for the whole state. So, I'm not going to be babysitting everybody. I can only come across stuff when I come across it, just like with LUPC. So we do the best we can. Let's see. So second inspection. So your system components are as follows. You got your tank, you got your disposal field, you got your fill extensions, you got your shoulder and fill extensions. So basically, you have that little area 2 feet out from the house, which is internal plumbing. Then you have your septic tank, your connection pipe, building sewer, internal plumbing is called the building drain. After that, it's called the building sewer. Then your septic tank and your effluent pipe. And then we got your distribution pipes, stone, shoulder, and fill extension. So there's all your parts. And as far as, again, covering the system, no part of what you see there should be covered before that's inspected at all. No part of a structure should be on any part of a disposal field, as you can see. Fill extensions, shoulders, stone, everything. Loam, as far as, 4 inches of backfill and 4 inches of loam over that after you're done. There is no inspection for that unless you, as a municipality, has a third inspection. Let's see. Let's go back to some of the questions here. When a kitchen is added, it becomes a dwelling unit and must also meet the bear requirements and life safety code from attached structures, which is true. How likely would it be you as a CEO would be aware of that? Probably not too likely. Unless they get a complaint. That's the only way they would be notified. So you made it into a structure. A lot of people just get to work inside their houses without thinking twice about it. You know, and a lot of people do stuff, especially for instance, I know we're getting a little off topic, but especially for instance, water heaters. You're supposed to get a permit every time you change out a water heater. Some people do, a lot of people don't. They just replace it and you don't know. That's where the problem comes in. Speaking as a water heater, the process of inspection a water heater is to make sure the vacuum breaker is installed, to make sure the temperature and pressure relief valve is installed, because I've had a couple of PowerPoints that I've had before had Mythbusters on it, and it was about a water heater exploding. And once you capped off that temperature pressure relief valve and that heated up, that was like a rocket that went right through the roof. That's why inspections are necessary. And a lot of people don't realize that, because I mean, you could hurt yourself very badly. You know, lurking inside your basement, a lot of people don't even think twice about it because, you know, it heats water. That's it. We're good. As long as you have hot water, you're all set. But that's the whole reason behind everything. And, you know, like John says here in the chat room, nobody's going to catch everything. It's impossible. So then you have people that just don't care, just don't get permits whatsoever, especially like with wood stoves, pointing out that side of the trailer, and they don't have the right piping and the house burns down. That's why inspections are there. And as inspectors and as site evaluators, like I said, you can only do what you can do. It's not your fault if you don't know anything about it. So, whoops. Oh, uh-oh. What did I do? All right. Here we go. Do that, do that, do that, do that. You know, again, prior to recovering the system, you know, if you used like 1.5 inch stone, in the stone embed system, excuse me, and the site evaluator, well, let me see in the chat, what is the minimum amount of stone according to the code book that you can use in a stone and pipe system? Well, yeah, 3/4 is right, but the minimum thickness is 12 inches. So if a site evaluator puts that he wants 14 inches of stone, do you inspect it by the design or by the code book? That's right, the design. So because the code book is the minimum, that's it. The site evaluator can put as much stone in there as he sees fit, or backfill, or loam, or anything like that. So just remember, when you're looking at this, the designs, it's not just, okay, well, 12 inches of stone, as long as they have that, they're all set. Well, if they only have 12 inches of stone and the design calls for 14, you're not inspecting it the way you should be. You got to make sure it does pass what the design says. So again, you know, you got the imaginary line where the ERP is, and you got all these measurements that are above. You got to make sure all that lines up with everything. Now this one, with the elevations that they have, is you have 48 to the top of the pipe. Mine is 48, excuse me. And mine is 60 to the bottom of the bed. So how much stone does he have there to the top of the pipe from the bottom of the bed? Do a little math. $12 inches. Right. So In those measurements, he has 12 inches. Now that's to the top of the pipe. In the code book, how much stone does he have to have over the pipe? You need 1 inch of stone over the pipe. So altogether, if he has 12 inches to the top of the pipe and there's 1 inch over the pipe, what is the site evaluator calling for the thickness of the stone? 13. So right there, he calls for 13 inches of stone. So if he only had 12, the contractor only had 12, and you inspected it and you approved it, you didn't do anybody any favors. So, as far as, I don't know if the contractor bid the job out for 13 inches of stone, or maybe it's just 12. But if he got away with 12 and it's supposed to be 13, and that's what he bid it out, then, he probably made himself a little bit more money. And by not doing it. But this is what I'm talking about. You got to make sure you inspect it according to what's there on the design. Let's see. I already did that. That's just the measurements that, filter fabric. There is no more hay. As of 2023, hay was deleted from the code book. Too dirty stone. I don't have any pictures for too dirty of stone, but I know I've asked a couple contractors to run their stone through sieves to do the sieve analysis to match the table that is in the code book. And it was, to my eye, it was very, 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 very dirty stone. So I didn't think it would pass, but it did pass. So if you think, and you have every right to have whoever, the contractor or the homeowner or whatever, run their stone through a sieve analysis to make sure it passes. That's great. But I've seen really, really dirty stone, and it has passed before. What is the tolerance of the horizontal ties do not jive with one another? Now, what do you mean as far as the tie points on the design? Let's say it's 75 feet and you come up with like 80. Is that what you're talking about? David? Well, I'll answer. If you have a tie point that is like 5 feet off, I would say if it's 5 feet or under, you're in the area. If it's inches off, it isn't a real problem. Feet off is a problem. Yeah. If it's like if you're within, I would say that's a tolerance. It should be pretty close to what they have on the design. Because if it isn't, if you're supposed to be 100 feet away from a well, and now you're only 95 feet, yes, that's an issue. So, it's as long as it meets the setbacks and you're within the area that the site evaluator does and has on their plan, you're all right. But if it encroaches onto a setback, then you need to call the site evaluator back and have it take from there. It's always good if you're unsure to call the site evaluator. See, you've been there, done that.
Yeah, Rick, can I
Yeah.
say something?
Sure.
I was wondering about the dirty stone, and I guess you're not talking about fines, you're maybe talking about sand and stuff, and the reason I bring it up because, I think we're all very sensitive to the fines when, if they, drip down through the stone, if there's clay on it or silt, if they drip down through the stone, it would affect the permeability of the soil. So I
Yeah.
assumed you were talking like about sand or something like that.
Yeah, yes, yeah,
Okay,
and you're right, fines do clog beds.
right.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and and I told this story before, but there was one that was really, really dirty, and we told him to we did do a gradation, and it was too dirty to pass the sieve. That was the only one that we've done. And we told him to take it out. We'll be back next week to look at it. We went back the week after with the plumbing inspector, and evidently he was a member of the voluntary fire department. So he brought his fire truck in and washed it down in place, which defeats the whole purpose, And yeah, that was funny to us, but it wasn't for him. But it was just one of those things that so he did have to take it out and replace it.
There you go.
There's a learning
Thank
curve.
you.
You're welcome. Let's see. Cover material. This is not good cover material. If this was probably either black or camouflage, it might be okay. But blue tarps are not allowed. Sorry. Doesn't work very well. Let's see. Oops, I'll go back. So the installer is responsible for basically everything. The installer is responsible for putting it in according to the design. The installer is responsible for backfill material. They're responsible for the actual 4 inches of backfill material on top of the field and the 4 inches of loam amendment mix to put on top of it to grow grass. Now, we all know that a lot of them places do not have 3 inspections. They only have 2, which is the bottom of the bed, top of the pipe, all proprietary device. And that's why we have this in there, that if maybe within a year or so, the rain erodes everything on top of it because there's no mulch or stabilization, then it's the contractor's issue. Unfortunately, the only way to rectify that 9 times out of 10 is a civil lawsuit between the homeowner and the contractor. There is that 1% that the contractor does come back and fix it, which is great, which is what they're supposed to do. But, a lot of times it's a civil lawsuit, which is too bad. But yeah, they are responsible either way. It says right in the code book. And so that would take care of that, hopefully, if something happened. Distribution boxes. Of course, we all know the inlet is higher than all the outlets of a D box. So make sure that they are not put in backwards, which they have been before. And it doesn't work that well if they are put in backwards. Normally, this looks so good. Pump system. Pump comes up to an elbow, faces towards not an outlet or a pipe inside the D box. That's good. That pump line should be below frost level all the way to where it's pumping from. And we've had problems in the past. If you had not the pipe, it just went right straight up and everything comes out when it turns on. And it all leaks out all over the place. And they're pumps that pump effluent up into a D box aren't really that pressurized. It's a low dose, but when they get full and that starts going and that cover isn't secure tight with the insulation on top of it, it does come out and it ruins it. It ruins the whole thing. So I would just Something like this, again, is not good either because that T is faced to both pipes. So it's going to shoot right down each one of them. So if they had that same issue with that T on it, I would turn that T a little bit just so it doesn't go down into the pipe, or just put an elbow on it facing not in that same direction. D-box is usually placed on the stone so it doesn't heave. But it's good to have that 2 inches polystyrene insulation on top of it anyway. It's all got to be, well, it doesn't say just D boxes. It states that everything has to be frost protected, no matter if it's the line, if it's a D box, anything. It's got to be frost protected in one way or another, mainly 2 inches of polystyrene insulation. Oh, I want to make that point too. If the design states D box or T, it gives the installer the choice of either one. And when you go there and it does say D box or T, then you got to approve it. Now, if it only says D box and there's a T involved, now that's got to stop right there. You got to call the site evaluator back up because evidently he wanted a D box there and there's not a T. Now, as long as the site evaluator revises it, then they're fine. You're all set. But it's got to say, that's why it's good for the site evaluator, if it's okay with him or her, to put D box or T, then it doesn't really hold anything up. There's different D boxes right there. The way they're hooked up, some are huge, some are not. But that's basically what it looks like. Your second inspection is now concluded. Now, holding tanks. First of all, in the shoreland zone, which is mainly 250 feet, and some are more, some are even less, but holding tanks are not allowed in the shoreland zone for a first-time system. That's it. There's no variances, no nothing. No holding tanks are allowed in the shoreland zone for a first-time system. Now, once you get by that, then, of course, rises still apply to holding tanks. So, you got the holding tank, you got to have at least a riser that facilitates pumping. Again, so it's easy to find it. And so the pumper is easy to find it for pumping out. So there you go. Say bang, bang, boom. You're done. No digging it up, no extra cost, nothing. So let's say septic tanks. Now, I know a lot of tanks now come just with the 2 ports, one on each end, instead of one big one in the middle and the little rectangle ones at the end, which is great. But holding tanks, again, or septic tanks, if they come like this, have to have at least one riser to grade. Holding tank. Now, it doesn't really matter which end on the double one, as long as it facilitates easy pumping. Now, of course, if you have a septic system and you have the riser over the filter, but it still facilitates easy pumping, that's okay. But as long as there's at least one going to grade that they can pump out and change the filter, easy. Limited conditions, that's just holding tanks in the shoreline zone. Setbacks, holding tanks have the same setbacks as septic tanks. Same thing. Alarm provisions. Holding tanks have to have alarms, audible and visible. and they have to have a pumpers agreement. Any holding tank that gets put in has to have a pumpers agreement. Again, just discontinuance of holding tanks. It's the same thing as septic tanks. You know, you got to have the pumped out and just cleaned out before they get crushed. Now, as far as sizing the holding tanks go, so if you have 3 bedrooms, sizing a holding tank is 7 times the amount gallons per day. So if you have a 3-bedroom home, 270 gallons a day, times 7, so you got to have a 1,890 gallon tank, which is basically a 2,000 gallon tank. Now you can have it, you know, either, you know, 2 1,000s or 1 2,000. I would think would be more practical if it could fit in there. And yeah, that's the way it's going to be. I would say, as far as a holding tank, a 2,001 would be more. Because if it goes like this, you know, that first one has to fill up, you know, with solids and everything. Most of that, before you get to pump it out, that first one's going to be getting kind of full, but the effluent is going to go into the second tank. So basically you're pumping out solids in the first, effluent in the second. So probably 1 2,000 gallon tank, I would think, would be better. That's just my opinion. But again, they both have to have rises on them if it's like that. Again, discontinuance of a holding tank, they got to be pumped out and crushed. Same way. Seasonal conversion permit. If that has a holding tank, a seasonal conversion permit cannot be accomplished. It's got to have a full system. And in order to, I have that. $50 at $12.50 goes to the state. Seasonal conversion permit. If you have a system that have a holding tank, like we just said, that cannot happen. So if somebody wants to convert their dwelling into a year-round dwelling that has a holding tank, a site evaluator has to come in and do a, let's say, first of all, let's say replacement system for what's there. But to do a seasonal conversion, that replacement system has to meet the LPI's authority under the replacement table, like setback. Like for instance, first time system's 100 feet from a well. In order to do a seasonal conversion, that replacement system would have to meet 60 feet, which is the LPI's authorization to approve it. Let's say it's a holding tank, but that holding tank was the first time system that was put in there a long time ago. In order to meet, let's say it was put in after 74. That holding tank, that system that replaces that holding tank would have to meet first time criteria because they're replacing a first time holding tank. Now, let's say that system was put in before 74. You know, no codes, no permits. Well, there was a code, but it was very loose. They could put a replacement system in if it was a first time holding tank to meet the seasonal conversion. Plus, that would better accommodate everything. Now, basically, if there's a holding tank there in the first place, there's probably an issue with getting a full system in there. But that's totally up to the site evaluator. There's a lot of stuff they could do now with, like, you know, pre-treatments and all that stuff to get something in there. So it still could be possible. Holding tanks prohibited. Say seasonal conversion. Did all that. Existing legal system, we just talked about that before. Legal replacement, I guess if public sewer is available, they can tie right into that if there's a holding tank. We just went through all this stuff, like with that public water supply. If it's 100, you go down to 60 feet. Is there any questions about seasonal conversion? I'm not even paying attention to the chat thing. Let's go back a little bit on the chat. Let's see. Larger D-box or pump systems help with this. Possible. I thought holding tanks were not allowed anywhere as a first-time system. No, if you have a holding tank ordinance in the shoreline zone, they're not. You cannot have one. But if you have a holding tank ordinance, or that's the only way it can become. So, like the ordinance rule, I mean, we do have in our rule book a holding tank ordinance or online that one can follow, and they can put in a local holding tank ordinance, or it has to be approved by the state. Either way, again, all of this stuff is up to the site evaluator. If they give you a design with a holding tank in it, and it'll probably have to have a variance from a state if you don't have a holding tank ordinance. It's right in the rule book how a holding tank ordinance works. There's different steps that you got to take that you can put first time holding tank in, but you'd have to follow all that. I don't have my rule book popped up right now, but yeah, just take a look at it and just familiarize yourself with it. Or you don't have to do that. If you do get a holding tank design in, I would go over those rules, what it takes to, permit it. And then if you have any problems, just give me a call. Shouldn't the riser go to the largest hole if only one is used? Yeah, I would say so. I would say that because that's the most feasible one to pump something out. So yes, I would say so. Rises has to be have to access and filter. If the tank has a filter, whichever hole accesses the filter, right? Can you discuss the holding tank ordinance requirement for towns? You'd have to go into the rule book and, like I just said, and go over that. It says it right there. If anybody has a problem with that, just let me know. We can go over it together. If there is no holding tank ordinance on the books, then it is not allowed as a first-time system anywhere. If there is if a town does not have a holding tank ordinance, I believe it would have to go through us for a variance. I believe. I am not 100% sure. I would have to go back to the rule book and read it. If towns have not adopted the state model holding tank ordinance or have not established their own ordinance that is as stringent as the state's ordinance, holding tanks are not allowed in the town. There you go. So I would assume that's right out of the rule book. I didn't understand when a replacement system, first time system when replacing a holding tank. Okay, if a structure, if a dwelling has a holding tank, and that's all that they've ever had is a holding tank, then that would be considered a first time system. So in order to do a full system, that would also have to meet first time criteria. Non-residential holding tanks are allowed for commercial 1,000 gallons per day outside the shoreline zone without a local ordinance. If a municipality has not adopted a holding tank ordinance under Section 8 and Appendix A, holding tanks for residential first-time use are not allowed within that municipality. So there you go. Hopefully that covers what we're talking about. And again, if anybody has an issue with any of this stuff, feel free to give me a buzz. That's why I'm here. So we can take care of it. Here's a system, a recent system that was put in, and I'm sure you can see it, that the filter fabric is not quite where it's supposed to be. So I think there's a bigger picture here. And that is a picture of the filter fabric. That filter fabric is not filter fabric. That's like the stuff, landscape material. So nothing's gonna go through that. The contractor says, well, they didn't want weeds coming up through the septic system. That's why they put that on the bottom. But yeah, there won't be any weeds coming up through it, but there won't be anything going down through it either. So yeah, that's a no-no. Here's a system that I just happen to be, that's my car right there, state car, happen to be driving by, and there's a malfunction, and it comes right out and goes right down, and it just keeps on flowing down to the numerous amount of neighbors below them. So yeah, that would just happen to be a drive-by thing. This is really not a malfunction. This was a first inspection and the plumbing inspector got called on. And we got there. Well, she got there. And they called me. So we both went out, and there's really nothing there to inspect. All it is a bunch of piles of rocks on top of mud. Yeah, they put it. That was at the bottom of the hill. You know, the site evaluator and the contractor should have known better before they even started, but they didn't. This is a possible malfunction. This is something that you know is going to malfunction, but you just don't know when. So when that train comes, you know it's going to go boom. Everything's going to be all over the place. Drive-by inspections are not suggested. You should not be doing, hey, yeah, that looks fine. That was done a long time ago. But I think we've tightened up with everything that we really don't have much of that anymore. I'm sure there are stuff still going on. Again, here's just a brief description of, you know, what's supposed to be there. 4 inches of topsoil. Again, these are just minimums. 4 inches of backfill. You know, you got filter fabric, at least 12 inches of stone, and there's your biomat and stone and the bottom of the bed. So there's your basic cross section. This happened in China, where I live, and it was a picnic structure that the guys that own that wanted to keep it as a picnic structure, which is fine. But what they wanted was to put a sink in there, just so they could dump their cooler and not on the ground and wash dishes or whatever every time they got there. So the site evaluator made a variance for a holding tank, and this was in the shoreline zone. I kind of considered it as not as a dwelling, but more of maybe a commercial type of application. So I did give them a variance just to do that, because I figured, well, they're going to be dumping it on the ground anyway. So we'll just do this. So I did it, got it approved. In the letter, I said, this is approved as a picnic shelter and cannot be remodeled or whatever as a dwelling unit and all that stuff. So I made sure I covered myself that that's what it's for, and that was it. And I'm glad I did, because we went there the next year, and that's what it looked like. Nice, beautiful log cabin, beautiful inside, holding tanks. There's a porta potty there, and if you looked over the roof of the porta potty, there's China Lake. So I can't remember how many feet this was that they moved this to, but it wasn't, I think 40, 50 feet maybe. Yeah, that was a big no-no. Big no-no. So that's just some of the stuff we run across. That's all I've got as far as that goes. I do have one more slide that, let me go over some of this stuff here. Why not go to a primitive system design on that one? Water source didn't allow. You mean on that picture I just showed you? If that's what it was, then, you know, with a primitive system, since there was nothing there, you would still have to have a place for a first time system. And that just didn't make it. There was no room for a first time system. So they couldn't even put a primitive system on there, or limited. So now this next slide, you guys are going to miss out on because this is online, but all the other ones that we've done, we had like a little gift shop outside our classroom, and we had scratch and sniff stickers. And you know, you guys missed out on that. It was good too. They were originally $12.99, and you know, we were having a sale for $5.99. They all went pretty good, and you know, get yours now while they last. And it was a really good thing. So, but you guys missed out on that one. So, all right. Do you guys have any questions at all with anything? Anything whatsoever? We have a tavern or bar with limited food, wanting to add outdoor seating. Does the outdoor seating count towards design flow, or they are exempt? They are not on a public sewer and have no on-site disposal system. That would have to go to the health inspection program. I don't know what they're doing now, if they're counting outdoor seats as seats. But that would be up to them. If you have any questions, call me. I can get you in touch with who to ask. All you guys are very welcome. Where in the rules does it talk about detached bedrooms? It's in the definition, detached bedroom. Always counted outdoor seating. Thank you. If there's a bathroom inside, they'll be using it. Thank you. So you're great. We're glad to do this. We try to get out there as much as possible to do this type of stuff. We want to make sure if anything pops up on our side that you guys know about it. Monday mornings, I usually have what I call septic snippets, and I have a whole list of emails that I just send out different things that has to do with the code that, you know, some people don't use that much, but it's still in the code book. And I send them out just so you guys are aware of what is. So if you want to be part of my septic snippet email, it might be every other Monday in the summer, but it's usually every Monday morning. Just send me an email saying you'd like to be added to the septic snippet emails. And then we'll get you on there. So you can be part of the whole group. When will section 17F and G be unforced? You have to broaden your comment a little bit, Richard. Sorry. Probably, enforced. So, hold on just 1 second.
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Putting in a system and the septic tank needs to be relocated. Does that need a new permit?
It does
Or
because it
application?
has to be inspected.
Okay.
Yep.
Can they do an amendment to the original permit?
Is everything already in the ground?
No, but
Okay.
I do have the plan.
Okay. That septic tank, if there's no tie points for that septic tank, that can be moved by the plumbing inspector.
Okay.
Yep. So that wouldn't have to be amended or anything.
Okay.
Now, if that shows it on the design, wherever it's moved to, I would suggest having that relocated on the design, just a little note that says it's moved over here.
Okay. Where else? Where could we get a copy of the rules, regulations? I know you were talking about your code book and stuff. I mean, is
Yeah.
that something we can get on our website?
Yeah, I believe it's right online. You can copy and print it right off.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
I I wanted to add that on my paperwork, I always, generally speaking, put place septic tank as is appropriate for a dwelling location. And that way I don't have to specify where it goes.
Yeah,
Um,
excellent.
and, and the plumbing inspector has a code, so
Right,
everything hopefully will go okay.
exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, 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 you're welcome. There was a questionnaire here. Can you explain briefly porta potties and the new rule on them? First of all, we do not enforce porta potties. All we say in our rule book is porta potties are not an alternative toilet. So if you have a primitive system or a limited system, you cannot count a porta potty as being part of that system. Now it does say, what we try to do is we try to get it so if there's a porta potty on site and it's there more than 7 days, you have to get written authorization from the local plumbing inspector to keep it there, other than if it's a construction site. Now that was shot down by somebody in the legislature. So now if you have a porta potty and it needs a health inspection program food license, you have to get written authorization from the plumbing inspector, and from that division, the health inspection program, to say it's okay to leave it there. That's basically it in a nutshell. But porta potties, unless they're for events and construction sites, they shouldn't be there at all. And unfortunately now, we tried to get it so it's forbidden altogether, but nobody wanted to do that somewhere up above. So it's up to the municipalities to enforce it however you see fit. Let's see. Any concerns of the riser requirement or freezing problems on seasonal dwellings? As far as risers go, I mean, I would suggest cutting a round piece of polystyrene insulation and putting it in the riser on top of the actual cover. So we should be all set. Now, it says 6 inches of soil over the tank top. I mean, if it's a seasonal property and they're not using it in the winter, of course, we know it's not creating heat. So I guess that's where I would say everything needs to be frost protected. So that tank itself should have insulation over the whole thing. As far as enforcing that goes, I don't know. I mean, that's up to the plumbing inspector, I guess. Let's see. As long as the pipe elevation is still allowed, gravity flows, or a septic tank. Yeah, I mean, the pipe's got to be from the house to the tank, 1/4 inch per foot. And of course, we know that pipes shouldn't freeze because it's got enough pitch to it. And the 1/8 inch per foot should have enough pitch to it as well. But again, it does say frost protected. So if a contractor or a LPI thinks it's too close and it won't be frost protected, they're in their right to say, listen, you need to put styrene over this and get it frost protected. If I was a homeowner and wanted gravity that was pushed to a pump, I wouldn't be very happy. Well, no, that's just, a pump is just something else that'll go wrong, basically. Some situations, very challenging. It's good to have that option. Everything else. Yeah, okay. When will section 17 F and G be enforced?
Brent, I did put those sections up in the chat if you scroll up
Oh,
a
you
little
did?
bit. Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Though I think I grabbed 17, but I did write 7 there. No, I grabbed 17. I just miswrote.
How far up was it?
Not too far up. 11:53, 7 minutes ago. The big long block of text.
Oh, okay, I see. Inspection report. Well, I mean, that should be enforced now, but as far as enforcing it goes, the problem with that is if somebody has to have an inspection report in the shoreline zone because they transfer a property, the plumbing inspector should be getting these inspection reports along with the person who hired them, especially if there's a malfunctioning system. So if the people who are inspecting the stuff aren't giving the plumbing inspector a copy of the inspection report, and the plumbing inspector notices that there's a transfer of property, they should be asking for it. That's the only way that's going to be enforced is the plumbing inspector. So, and the inspectors should know this. They have to give them to the plumbing inspector if it's in the shoreline zone. If it's not in the shoreline zone, they don't have to, but they need to give it to them. The fill that's been designed over 20 or 40 years ago, there have been a handful of them, yes. The reason why we put those numbers in there, because before there was a certain date that it had to be, the fill had to be there. This way, the 20 or 40 years goes with the years that we're in now. So there's no specific date they have to follow. They just have to prove it was in there 20 years ago. How they do that that's totally up to them. If the site evaluator says, yes, this has been there for 20 years, that's, I would think, good enough for that site evaluator, because I don't think he would want to put a system in that's not going to work or doesn't follow the rules. But you never know, that does happen. But we have a lot of faith in the site evaluators, a lot of trust in them. So Google Earth helps, yes. Exactly. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I think we're all set. Thank you guys for showing up. I really appreciate it. It's great to, the whole thing is just trying to keep in contact with everyone and at least trying to do it this way. I'm not bouncing all over the state. It's nice to do this once in a while, but I'd rather be in person. But it's good to do this to make sure nobody else has any questions. So it's 12 o'clock, so I guess you guys are free. So thank you very much for everything. Have a good day.
So what's our next step for getting